Welcome along on this Friday evening to the state of Scottish football. It's your Friday panel here. It's myself, Colin Watt, and I'm joined as always by the fantastic Seán McGill. Seán, how are you this Friday evening?
I'm pretty good, aye. Happy to be here. Looking forward to talking. Well, am I looking forward to talking about the national team? Meh. I usually like talking about the national team. I feel strongly about it, but it wasn't great with the week, as I'm sure we'll get on to it. But I'm happy to be chatting to you as always on a Friday, Colin.
Yep, we do have the World Cup 2022 qualifier against Moldova, which we'll go over. We'll pick our teams for the game as well, and we'll look at the stats behind the decisions. We're also going to take a look at the SPFL Trust this weekend. Celtic B team are up against Morton in probably what is one of the ties of the round. Kilmarnock are playing in that as well, up against Falkirk. Seán, are you looking forward to that? You getting along?
I'll be on Rose duty on Saturday afternoon. They play Barrie Rangers in the Lowland League, but I definitely would have been. It's kind of this weird rivalry between Kilmarnock and Falkirk. You know how that sometimes happens where doesn't make sense in terms of geography or anything like that, but there's just that little bit of like extra needle in a fixture. There's that in Kelly versus Falkirk. I mean, the last day of the 2010-11 season was basically Kilmarnock versus Falkirk at Robbie Park. Loser went down. A draw was good enough for Kelly. And Kelly, it was 0-0 that day. Falkirk hit the bar with 5 minutes to go. And I remember a wee guy like absolutely petrified behind the goals that day. And then playoff final 2016, Falkirk won the first leg, came to Robbie Park with a 1-0 lead, and then Kelly thrashed them 4-0 to stop them from making the return to the top flight. So there's that little bit of bite between those two sides. And I remember when, I think it was when Lee McCulloch left Kilmarnock, there was all this talk about Falkirk also had a vacancy, and it was like Falkirk's a better job than the Kilmarnock job at the moment, even though they're in the Premiership. And then Falkirk got relegated from the Championship, and Kelly finished third that season. But it's fine. It's fine. It's what happens. Or the next season. A sliding doors moment. So it should be a good one, and hopefully a decent crowd at Robbie Park.
And it's interesting you mentioned you're away on Bonnyrigg duty this weekend, because we will be discussing 10 games into the season, how the Colts experiment is going, and get Seán's opinion. Hopefully a bit of a balanced view from Seán. I know it could be a bit biased, but we'll see how that one goes. We'll also take a look at Dundee United Dundee. Speaking of derby games, fans have been asked to pay £30 to go along to that one. Is it getting back to the stage where we should be setting maximum price limits for games in Scotland to encourage fans to come along? The 20s Plenty campaign is one of the things that's kicking around in that instance. And we'll also be taking a look ahead of the opening weekend of fixtures in the SWPL as Glasgow City go for their 15th consecutive league title. But a warm welcome along to everyone who is watching. We are live on Facebook, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Twitch, on probably everything. We've just not got a Sky channel yet. I'm sure we'll have that one tied down before the year's out. But a warm welcome to everyone who's joining us, including Feed the Bear, saying hail hail to everyone. Probably not to Seán, but Daniel's in, and he says it's always a good show when Marvin and Colin are hosting. That's a bit of more of a dig. And Jerry is joining us live from Miami. Buenas tardes, amigos. Buenas tardes to yourself. ¿Cómo estás, Jerry? Let us know how you are. Let's start with the big game on Saturday. Scotland versus Moldova at Hampden. A 3 o'clock kickoff on a Saturday. Finally, something to look forward to, or maybe not so after that performance on Wednesday night. Seán, what was your thoughts?
I hope it's not a 3 o'clock kickoff on Saturday, because I'm going. It's 7:45.
Is it 7:45? I thought it was 3 o'clock. Oh, well.
I'll be at 2 games at once then. I'm heading straight from New Dundas Park to Hampden on Saturday, so a wee evening kickoff there. But I am really looking forward to it because we should win. You'd like to think that it should be a fairly dominant performance from Scotland. That's my hope anyway. And a chance to kind of get out. It's a chance for Steve Clarke, who's been criticised throughout his Scotland tenure for being too defensive, too pragmatic, not showing enough attack and intent. And a game at home to Moldova, you've got to. And I think that it'll be a chance to sort of get out of that funk that they've been in terms of sitting defensively. We've played some very good teams in recent months, including the Euros, of course, but this is a chance to get their attacking groove going, and I think try something new. Hopefully, I don't know if that'll be the case, because I know more than most that Steve Clarke is very married to his principles, and sometimes that goes extremely well, and sometimes, as has been the case for Scotland in recent months, it doesn't. So hopefully this is a wee turning point.
Yeah, it is a 7:45 kick-off, apologies, and the game is live on Sky Sports for anyone in the UK. I'm sure Jerry will know which channel it's on over in America as well. He can maybe let us know. Scotland go into the game as favourites with the bookmakers 2-11 for them, and Moldova are 25-1 for the victory, 19-4 for the draw. Scotland currently ranked 44th in the world, Moldova 177th. We've played them before, only once before, and that was back in 2004-2005. In October 2004, we drew over in Moldova 1-1 with Stephen Thompson scoring, and at home on June 2005, we beat them 2-0. The goals coming from Christian Daly and James McFadden. Now, I struggle to remember that far back, so I'm going to guess that you have no memory of these games at all, John.
Absolutely none, mate. I would have been 5.
What is interesting, but as I did take a look at the starting 11 from that Scotland team, and there is one player that could potentially be playing on Saturday that played in that game, and it's not Davy Weir, but it is Craig Gordon. He's someone who has been a Scotland mainstay now for the last 15 years. After that performance on Wednesday night, I think he was unfortunate for both of the goals, and I think it's a kind of shoe-in that he keeps the gloves for Saturday.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if there was any game of this triple header that you're going to try one of the inexperienced keepers in Xander Clark or Liam Kelly, then I guess it would be this one, because Austria's a massive game on Tuesday. So Craig Gordon will definitely start that. So but I get it's a goalkeeper can play a triple header fairly easily, you would think. So I would expect Craig Gordon to keep his place. And I was in the pub on Wednesday watching the game, and I think it's going to get a little bit tedious because during the Euros, Craig Gordon had a very good season at Hearts, and David Marshall obviously made some mistakes, a very high-profile one in the opening game, and all the chat was Craig Gordon wouldn't have done that. If Craig Gordon had started, then those mistakes wouldn't have happened. I mean, I've got a lot of Hearts pals, so I probably hear that more than most. And then on Wednesday, for the second one that goes through Gordon's legs, I heard folk in the pub going, David Marshall would have saved that, and it's like, we need to stop those comparisons. David Marshall isn't even playing club football. He's third choice at Derby.
He's third choice at Derby at the minute, yeah.
We're in the mud anyway, so I don't think you need to worry about that. So for me, I think Craig Gordon's experience makes sense to keep him in the side. He's a great goalkeeper. I think he's the best out of the three at the moment as well. It pulled off some great saves at Tannadice last weekend, especially from that free kick from Charlie Mulgrew, a great stretch save from Craig Gordon. And his experience is important. So definitely I think he's got to stay in the team for this one.
I'm just going to go through the rest of that team from 2005 just to see kind of the players that we were picking back then. It was Walter Smith that was in charge back then as well. The team was Gordon, Weir, Presley, Webster, Alexander, Fletcher, Ferguson, Hartley, McNamara and Kenny Miller. And we actually struggled in that game. I think we scored in the 56th minute from Christian Daly, and then a goal from James McFadden. Some interesting names on the bench as well. Ryan Essen was the backup goalkeeper. We had Stephen Caldwell, Lee Miller, Derek Riordan, Stephen Thompson, James McFadden and Christian Daly both came off the bench to score. I think when you look at the squad now and you compare it to back then, it's certainly a better squad that we've got in terms of depth and experience. Well, not so much experience, but experience playing at a higher level.
I definitely. I mean, that's the thing with when Steve Clarke sort of came into this job, that there was so few players on like a decent number of caps because there's just been so much chopping and changing, and that's why he's gone for this sort of consistency first, loyalty first approach, which makes a degree of sense, but it can also be frustrating when you have underperforming players, or that keeps out players who you feel like are in form and should be breaking into the national team. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword, that one. But like certainly that you look at that Scotland squad just now, and it's hard not to get excited. I think that there's so much talent, and a lot more talent than I've seen since I've been watching football. And it's just a shame that it's not clicking for whatever reason at the moment. I think we've only won 2 games out of our last 11, and those were against Luxembourg and the Faroe Islands. Luxembourg were down to 10 men at about half time, I think it was. So
before that as well, yeah.
But before that, we went on that unbeaten run, one of the longest that Scotland had seen for a very long time. So it's just like picking up that momentum. And all that good run came from defensive solidity, and that wasn't particularly on show in that first 15 minutes in Copenhagen. So I think it's about getting back to basics, but also just taking the game to teams, not inviting so much pressure on, because we're not soaking it up at the moment for whatever reason. So I think being a little bit more forward thinking could definitely sort of bear fruits for Scotland, and I hope that happens on Saturday against what you'd say is weaker opposition, definitely.
Especially at Hampden, I'd have to say. Let's take a look at the tail of the tape so far for both teams. Scotland have played 4 games in this group, winning 1, drawing 2 and losing 1. So it's a 2 each draw at home to Austria, 1 each away to Israel, a 4-0 victory over the Faroes, which you just mentioned a minute ago, Sean, and then Tuesday night was the first defeat of the campaign to Denmark. In terms of Moldova, they have 1 point after 4 games. They picked up a draw at home to the Faroe Islands on their opening day. They followed that up with an 8-0 defeat over in Copenhagen, a 4-1 defeat at home to Israel, and they lost their last game 2-0 to Austria. Now, Moldova's last qualification victory in any sort of competition was back in June 2019, which was a 1-0 victory over Andorra. I think the record goal scorer only has 11 goals, if I'm correct. This is a team which Scotland should, and you can see the bookies are definitely saying should also be comfortably beating, but they have picked up some injury concerns, some COVID concerns. So you look at the team that played on Tuesday night, there is a couple of players coming back into it. But Sean, I'll be interested to hear what your 1 to 11 would be for the game on Saturday.
Are we jumping straight in?
Let's jump straight in because we've got Stevie Clark chat to follow this.
Right, okay. So I think I'm not saying that this has massively impacted my thinking of my team, but there's a few players who are 1 booking away from missing the Austria game, which, as I said, is huge on Tuesday. How big it is depends, I think, on how Austria get on in Israel on Saturday night, because Denmark have run away with this group. I think we can all see that. I mean, they thrashed Austria 4-0 more than they thrashed us. So I think that the first is probably out of sight now. So you've got to go for that playoff spot in second, and that means that Scotland just have to just better the results of both Austria and Israel. So if Austria particularly the one you're looking at. So if they drop points in Israel, that will make it that maybe a draw would be fine for us in Vienna. But if they get a win in Israel, you're really looking to win that game on Tuesday. So Grant Hanley, Ryan Christie, Lyndon Dykes, Stephen O'Donnell and Kevin Nisbet are all just 1 booking away from missing that very important game. And I think that Steve Clark will stick with that back 3-5, whatever you want to call it. People might think that in a game like this that he'll go to a back 4 because it's to be a little bit more forward thinking. But actually in that Faroe Islands game, it's when Kieran Tierney got the most joy he's had in that left centre back. He came flat. Got
playing alongside Robertson.
Dovetailing all night and covering each other, and Tierney got fought and, like I said, got 3 assists, which was pretty impressive. Despite that, I'm sick of the back 5. I think that it invites too much pressure onto us, and I'd like to see a change. Especially if the back 5 was ever going to be work for Scotland, it was going to be in Copenhagen on Tuesday in that situation, and I just feel like the way that it's almost if we sat in, we were on the back straight away, and I'd like to see a bit of a change. So I'm going to back 4. Craig Gordon keeps his place. For me, I think that Andy Robertson isn't quite fully fit after missing so many games for Liverpool. He only just came back. Him playing 3 games in such a short period of time probably isn't a good idea, and I probably prefer Kieran Tierney at this moment in time anyway. So I'd say Tierney left back. I'd go Hanley and Hendry as my centre backs, and I'd have Nathan Patterson as my right back because I think he gives you more attacking outlet. and Stephen O'Donnell, who is a booking away from missing the game. Right, I'm going a wee bit bold, and you know Southampton, how they play that 4-2-2-2 with like inverted wingers that are kind of like central attacking midfielders, and then they just sort of press really high. I think that worked really well for Scotland. So you have Gilmour and McGregor as the pivot sitting, and then Turnbull and Christie ahead of them, so they can drift wide, but they'd also make space in those attacking areas. And then I would go with Shea Adams and Kevin Nisbet up front. So those sort of pairs all building up. Because I think that Ryan Christie can play wide, but also drifts in. That makes sense. It gives space for the fullbacks to get forward, and they're both good attacking fullbacks. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And you have McGregor and Gilmour, who are really good at covering those channels to stop any potential counter-attack. So I'm getting a wee bit tactically switched on, and I think 4-2-2-2 could be a winner.
So I'm going to disagree with almost everything that you said. And there is a couple of positions which I think the two of us would have a good and interesting talking point about, and it's two that I've highlighted in my team. So I'll go through my team. I think he's going to stick with a 5-3-2. I think it's the Steve Clarke tactic. So I didn't even can try and work out the sort of Christmas tree formation that you were trying to go with there. So I've gone with Craig Gordon in goal, a back three of Tierney, Hendry and Hanley. Now, right back, I'm split. I'm very, very split. If it was me personally, I would probably pay Nathan Patterson. But I think Stevie Clarke's love child, Stephen O'Donnell, will probably find his way back into the squad for Thursday night. And to be fair to him, he doesn't normally let his side down when he plays. And as I said, he is Stevie Clarke's love child, so there's every chance that he's going to play, whether he's a booking away or not. On the left, I've got Robertson. I think, as you said, the Robertson-Tierney thing, that really works well for Scotland, and I think we could see that playing again. Midfield three, I've went with Gilmour, McGinn, who's returning from isolation, and I'm split between Callum McGregor and Lewis Ferguson. I don't know which one I would pick.
Callum McGregor's a much better player.
Now, I agree with you. Maybe as a Celtic fan, I'm thinking I don't want McGregor to be playing that many games because we have a small enough squad as it is. As a Scotland fan, you'd probably pick him. But I think there's a reason the likes of Turnbull and Ferguson are in this squad. I think these are games, especially this is the kind of weakest team we'll play over the three, where you can give these guys minutes to see what they can do. I don't think Ferguson would be overly stretched against Moldova. I think you could see a decent performance out of him. And I would probably rest McGregor for Tuesday night, which I think is the bigger game out of the two. So, interested on your thoughts on that.
Yeah, are you resting him for Tuesday night? Are you resting him for whenever Celtic are back in action?
Both.
Yeah, I mean, I like Lewis Ferguson as a player. I wouldn't have had him in this squad at all. I just thought that there's too many players who do a kind of similar job to him in this squad. I think he could definitely be one for the future. We're blessed with central midfielders at this moment in time, but your likes of Jack and McGregor aren't the youngest. They're not old by any stretch, but like, they will keep sort of ticking over in age, and you want to have these sort of midfield options coming through as well. So I think that's exciting in terms of Lewis Ferguson. And you're right that if he was going to play any game in this triple header, it would be this one to sort of just bed him in nicely. Who else did you have? Gilmour, McGinn, and either McGregor or Ferguson. Would you rather have David Turnbull in than Celtic?
No,
you don't want
not even that. I just think McGinn always has his best performances when he plays for Scotland. You're right. I just a bit worried that he's just out of isolation, sort of like the last couple of days. But he wasn't positive though, was he? He was just a close contact. He was, but he didn't have any symptoms. He did have COVID, not any symptom. I saw a clip on his press conference today saying that a few years ago he would have been ordering Deliveroo's and cans of tenants to his room. I've seen that. He can't do that anymore. So yeah, I mean, maybe it makes sense to give. I'd maybe just chuck John McGinn on for the last half an hour, give him the minutes, because you want a firing John McGinn on Tuesday, definitely. Mm-hmm. And I think this might make more sense for a game to play David Turnbull, just because he also needs that first competitive Scotland start
as well. And I think that when you're going to have a lot of the ball and you're going to be looking to score lots of goals in this one, I think he gives you that goal threat from open play and in terms of his delivery from set pieces, which I thought we were a bit disappointing on Wednesday. So they're different players, but if I was saying you want to give McGregor a rest, I would be more inclined to play David Turnbull than Lewis Ferguson.
Well, I'd have to say if you're going to play David Turnbull over John McGinn, then I think Callum McGregor needs to play in that squad, because you'd be sitting with a midfield there of, say, Gilmour, Ferguson and Turnbull, which is still quite young, quite inexperienced. You probably still need that one player in there who's got the experience that can sort of anchor it. So in that case, I would probably keep McGregor in the squad if you're not going to play McGinn.
Yeah, I really like the thought of what McGregor and Gilmour could sort of form as a partnership, and how much chance will they get to do that, because McTominay will come back in. He's obviously a fantastic player as well. Ryan Jack has been key for the Scotland side when he has been fit. So it's great to have all these options, but it's just hard. But in terms of, I think they complement each other really well, both opposite footed. I think they can both do that role really well. Like I said, like filling those channels and stopping counter-attacks. I think they're great at it, and they're both technically very good footballers as well. It was really curious to me to see Callum McGregor so high up the pitch. I think he does such a good job. I said this on the Monday State of Scottish Football when we were reacting to the Old Firm, that I love Callum McGregor as that anchor, that number 6 in a midfield. I think that there's a reason that he pushed Scott Brown out the team when Brendan Rodgers was the manager. I think he does that so well in a team like Celtic who dominate the ball. It makes sense to have a player like that who can just keep it ticking over. So I really like when he does that, and I think Billy Gilmour's, we know, is going to be a fantastic talent, and he might as well rack up the minutes just now. Our best midfield three at this moment in time, if everyone's fit, is McGregor, McGinn, Gilmour. I think there's no doubt about that. I just think you've got to have one eye kind of on Tuesday, and also the fact that there's so many players coming back.
I'd say it's between Gilmour and McTominay for that holding role, as you're saying, if we had everyone fit. With McTominay,
I'm not sure what McTominay is. McTominay bursts forward a lot. I think Gilmour's a little bit more disciplined.
Yeah.
It's still hard to know exactly what type of player Billy Gilmour is, because his minutes are still pretty limited overall.
Now, I've gone with a 2 up front, and I've went with Che Adams and Lyndon Dykes. I do think that they two have a decent partnership that they've formed over the sort of limited amount of minutes that they've got for Scotland so far.
I did not see a decent partnership between Dykes and Adams.
I thought I did, to be perfectly honest. I did. And I also think that you've got that little and large partnership up front, which is always very useful. I think you've got the likes of Dykes to knock down the ball for Adams. It's where he tends to play his best sort of footballs in around the box for Southampton. So that's the two I would go with up front. Nisbet, as you said, only just coming back into the squad. I think he's a very similar player to Adams, and I don't know if you could go with two similar types of forwards up front, especially for Scotland.
I'd say Adams' game is more like, Adams is less of a goal scorer for me. I think the way you see him kind of like floating around the edge of the box, it makes perfect sense in that Scotland team, and he should really be the perfect partner for Lyndon Dykes, because he is a great finisher as well. But I just think the way he kind of drifts it, he's almost like a little bit of a 10 as well in the way that he drops back, and then you've got that proper target man in Dykes. When we play Lyndon Dykes, who's had a great start to the season for QPR, by the way, I think it's something like 10 goal contributions in his last 14 games and domestically. I think he's really sort of settling into life at Loftus Road, and he's shown that so far at the start of this championship season. But when we play Lyndon Dykes, I feel like we're too inclined just to punt the ball up to him. And he actually is technically a lot better than people give him credit for. People thought he was a bit of a joke up here, but I loved him as a player. I just, the way Billy defenders are technically actually very good. So if you play the ball into his chest or into his feet rather than over his head and just trying to get him to knock it down, I think you can have a lot more joy. I think you saw that. There was some lovely moves on that right-hand side against Denmark when Dykes sort of would chest it down and play it back, and then he'd pop it off to the wing. So I'm more pro Lyndon Dykes than a lot of my pals, and a lot of them think that he's just this lump who shouldn't play for Scotland again. I would like to see it, but I also think that having a proper goal scorer in Nisbet, who, with Adams, like I said, who's a little bit more creative as a forward and not just that sort of fox in the box, could work really well together. And if you're going to try new pairings, I guess home to Moldova is one of the best times to do it, because you don't get friendlies anymore. Nations League is meaning that you get like one or two friendlies every 2 years. They're all competitive games, so you've got to kind of take your opportunities to experiment, and I hope this is one to do it, and I hope we just see a change in mentality and not just a change in personnel as well.
So we'll go with a prediction before we take a look at some of the talking points around Steve Clarke after Wednesday's game. So with the team that you've picked, Sean, what would your prediction be?
The team I've picked, 6 or 7. The team that Clarke will probably go with. Do you know, I'm going to say that there's going to be a real intent to impress the Tartan Army on Saturday night. I think he knows that the pressure's kind of ramping up, and a defeat to the Euro 2020 semi-finalists isn't an embarrassment in and of itself. It's this run we've been on, and the fact that it was pretty much over within 15 minutes, and then the Denmark could just sit in second gear. So I think they're going to really know that they need to put on a little bit of a show. So I'm going to say 4-0 to Scotland on Saturday night. And I hope so, because I'm there and I need to have a good night.
Well, that is literally the same prediction I'm going for. It's 4-0.
Just copy me all the time.
I know. I didn't already have it written down before you said anything. And I didn't show you my notes before we started. But anyways, there was a lot of discussion on social media on Wednesday night after the game, actually during the game as well, around the future of Stevie Clarke. Now, considering the guy got us to the Euros, to be one game after that and even discussing his future as Scotland manager it's interesting to say the very least. I think there's quite a few Scotland fans that would think that Scotland should have done better at the Euros. Some fans are just happy to be there. But let's take a look at his record overall. So under Stevie Clarke, we've now played 25 games. Officially, we've won 11, which includes the 2 penalty shootouts against Serbia and Israel. Otherwise, we've won 9, and those games are against the Faroe Islands, Luxembourg, Slovakia, twice against the Czech Republic, San Marino, twice against Cyprus and against Kazakhstan. We've drawn 5 against Austria, twice against Israel, against England and against the Netherlands, and we've lost 9 against Slovakia, Israel, Czech Republic, Croatia, Denmark, and twice both to Belgium and Russia. Overall, Sean, what do you think of Steve Clarke's performance as Scotland manager? Is the fact that we qualified for the Euros through the Nations League skewing people's opinions on his overall term, or do you think that overall he is the long-term option as Scotland boss?
It's tough because you don't want to just pin Euro 2020 qualification and say that he's kind of untouchable for a while. I don't think that's a good way to approach any sort of managerial position, and especially the nature of it, considering it was 2 penalty shootouts and it was the safety net of the Nations League. My counterpoint to that is, although the Euros were disappointing, and I don't think we'll ever get a better chance to qualify at a group stage, that's not anything against the opposition. It's the fact that we had 2 home games. One, the non-home game is a derby, which kind of acts as a leveller in a way, I think. Czech Republic, although they went on to have a pretty decent tournament, that seemed like a winnable opening game. Like you said, when you were going through results, we had beaten them fairly recently under Clarke, so there was definitely scope there to do that. My counterpoint would be that there seems to have been progression over that time. You can see that Scotland were kind of, for a long time, didn't have any clear identity. We have a clear system. We know the players are well drilled on that system. It's just whether that gets the best out of the talent we have, and I don't think that's the case at the moment. I think tweaks need to be made so this Scotland team can be performing at its sort of optimal level, because there is so many good players in there. I don't feel like at this moment in time the system and whatever Clarke's doing is getting the best out of them. I understand the desire for stability, and I think that's why he was given the contract extension, regardless of whether we qualify for the World Cup, because I think qualification for the World Cup is going to be really, really hard. I think it's more about whether he can get us to Euro 2024. I think that should be our aim. So I understand that in a sense. I also had a conversation with some pals about this, and we're talking about different options who could come in as manager, and there's not many names screaming out as you, and you're never going to get an elite manager to become Scotland boss. It's not going to happen. But there's nobody kicking about here going, I definitely want them. I definitely want them. And the players seem to respond pretty well to Steve Clarke. They seem to have a good relationship with him. They seem to. It's a more sort of harmonious and positive camp than you've seen for a very long time, I think. So for that reason, I would still stick with Clarke. But for me, there has to be a change in tact, that change in mentality, just to be a little bit more forward thinking. And I think that Scotland fans would feel a lot better if we gave Denmark a really good go on Wednesday, but it was kind of like a meek surrender in those opening minutes. So for me, it's more about Steve Clarke being aware of what's happening, aware of the project and where it's going, but also being sort of self-aware enough to make these changes so that this very talented squad of players can at least put on a show for the fans, can at least... And sometimes that doesn't mean playing amazing football. If that means being resolute and scoring a goal on the counter, Scotland fans will still love that. We love Scottish football because it's not perfect. We're not expecting sort of Brazil, 1970s Brazilian like that. We just want a team who we can be really proud of in their performances no matter the result. And I don't really think that's the case at this moment in time. So a little bit of sort of going back to the drawing board, I think would be beneficial to Clarke and his backroom team, and hopefully can get folk back on side, because there was such a good feeling heading into the Euros and it has sort of waned over the last few months.
Couple of comments coming in. If you are watching on YouTube, please do subscribe to A State of Mind. We're getting ever closer to 15,000 subscribers, which is a massive milestone for us. Danny Boy 68 coming in to say all the managers are outpriced. It'll be Clarke for the foreseeable. Now, the one argument I was seeing on social media on Wednesday night, and Daniel Max brought this in as well, Strachan was better. So there's a lot of people who would have said that Gordon Strachan would have probably got the same sort of results out of this Scotland team when you compare the squads that he had compared to what Steve Clarke's got available to him. For me, when you look at it, I think it's a win percentage rate of just over 40%. 36 if you don't include the 2 victories in penalty shootouts against Serbia and against Israel. I'm looking at the teams we've beat, and to be perfectly honest, I expect Scotland to beat pretty much all of them. Maybe with the exception of Slovakia. I think Slovakia was a big victory. It was a 1-0 victory at Hampden. I'm looking at the teams we've drawn against, and I mean, Israel, apart from the fact that we play them all the time, I do think that we, as a side, should be better than Israel. The draws against England and the Netherlands are fantastic results. But then I look at some of the defeats as well. I mean, getting beat off Israel away, defeats against the Czech Republic when they basically had their B team out there as well at times. Against Denmark, as you said, Euro 2020 semi-finalists. Belgium and Russia. Look, Russia, you probably should get something more than what we got, but against Belgium, you're not going to. This is the kind of standard we're going to come up against now. You take a look at the likes of England's draw for this qualification group. They got a very simple draw because they're top seeds. In international football, there's such a gulf and class between the top teams, the sort of B-level teams, and then I think the C-level teams where Scotland sort of fit into just now. I don't think we're a B-level team. And to make that step up, you've got to either play teams of the same quality around about you, or you've got to play the teams that are just slightly better, but you've got to beat them as well. So if Scotland's got any ambition for qualifying for the Euros in 2024, some of these games, like against Israel, like against Russia at home especially, you've got to win those games.
Austria at home as well, like that's ended 2-2, and we came from behind twice. John McGinn scored the equaliser with that overhead kick. In that game, 2-2 seems like a pretty decent result against a team who's probably your biggest competition for second, and you came from behind twice, you haven't lost. I think that's a positive. But if you sort of cast your mind back to that game, we could have taken it to Austria. They were not up to it that night. But it was still the back three hindered us that night. We weren't sort of going for it. If we changed the 4, which we ended up doing in Israel because we had to try and get a goal, and continue went to centre-back and a 4, and we ended up getting our equaliser and just couldn't push for the winner, unfortunately. I think that sometimes we've been too sort of slow to respond. I think that worked in Israel. The fact they changed, obviously you'd have liked them to get a winner, but there's times where we've shown a little bit too much respect to teams, I think, and we've not sort of played our own game. And I would like to see us do that a little bit more because, as we keep on saying, it's a talented bunch of players. So Clark needs to, I think, try and get the best out of them in terms of what they can do, rather than just being reactive to the talents of the opposition.
For me, it's a must-win on Saturday night, and we will be covering the game live here on A State of Mind on the State of Scottish Football. 30 minutes before the game, taking a look at the team lineups at half-time for the 15 minutes and 30 minutes afterwards, digressing over what will hopefully be 3 points in the bag for Scotland. Not sure who the lineup is yet, but you will find out on social media. Just tune in and you can see who of the State of Scottish Football team will be covering the game.
Tune back out if you don't like them.
Don't leave any nasty comments. That's not nice. There's been enough of that on social media this week. The other talking point we have this evening, and I guess we're already 35 minutes in, so let's make the move on to that, is the Colts experiment. Now, we spoke about this off-air last week. Myself, yourself, and Grant Campbell, who was joining us last week. And to me, I think it's something that we do have to discuss on here. Now, for anyone that isn't aware of the current situation, both Celtic and Rangers, B teams or Colt teams, have been granted admission into the Lowland League for this season only. The vote went in favour of both teams 11-5. One of the teams that voted against it was Bonnyrigg Rose, of which Sean is part of the media team, so that's why we're going to get Sean's input on this. Some of the rules that the teams have to look at: the maximum age is 20, with the exception of one additional outfield player and one goalkeeper who can be under 21. You can also play one player or coach which isn't playing for the first team, as long as they're aged 33 or over. And the majority of the squad have to be Scottish. I'm sure there's a couple of talking points coming out of that for yourself, Sean. There was a £25,000 entry fee paid by both Celtic and Rangers for this. And if a player plays 5 games for either the Colts or the first team, then they can't transfer between the two teams until the next transfer window. Now, looking so far, Rangers have played 9 games, winning 8 and losing 1. Celtic have played 8, winning 5, drawing 2 and losing 1. Rangers have scored 34 goals with 5 against. Celtic 23 goals for with 5 against. Overall, Sean, now, we kind of spoke about this on the Football Insomniac before this happened, but overall, has your thoughts changed from the vote to where it is now in terms of both teams being included within the division?
First of all, it's important to say that anything I say is my opinion and not the opinion
yes, definitely.
Athletic, who I do some media work for. That's anything I say is just how I feel. But like Colin said, the Bonnyrigg Rose decided to ask their members, of which we have over 200, to cast their vote on whether they would like the Colts to join. It was a 95% rejection of the proposal. So that's where the fans, who we thought were integral to that decision, and that's how they felt about it. For me personally, I mean, it's not like we played Celtic on the opening day, and it's not like I was sat there like, this is a joke, it's a disgrace, all that sort of stuff. Like, I disagree with it. I still do disagree with it. But they are decent sides. I think they up the competitiveness of the league. I think that the players have been raising their game, because no matter what you're saying, you're beating Celtic or Rangers, and I think that still means something to a lot of the players in the squad. And these players are destined for big things. They're the brightest people in the game at the moment. I was in Scottish. The majority are Scottish. Yeah, there's quite a few non-Scottish players as well. But I think they want to test themselves against men and sort of that sort of side of senior football. And then you also have the fact that these guys want to play against the most talented youngsters and have a go and sort of test themselves in a way as well. So I think that it complements each other in that way. There's still, the sort of parachute into the Lowland League is still something that I personally disagree with. And ideally, I'd just like to see more B teams as a whole, and those teams sort of compete against each other. And then we can still get the best Scottish talent. We can still, I think, for me, and I'm sure we'll talk about alternative solutions, but to me, a revamped development league, a reserve league, whatever you want to call it, would be fairer and I think a little bit more beneficial as well.
Now, when you take a look at the quality of the two sides in the league so far, there's comments coming in, and I think we've got a Rangers fan with us, which is great. He's got the Lee Griffiths thing. I'll keep that up very quickly. Just saying basically that Rangers Colts are too good for the Lowland League. Now, Bonnyrigg are top of the league at the moment after playing 10 games. Rangers, I believe, are a point behind. Is that right?
Haven't played one less game.
Haven't played one less game, so they would go top of the league if they win their game in hand. Unfortunately for Rangers, they can't actually get promoted beyond that, so it would be Bonnyrigg as it stands that goes into the playoff pyramid.
The thing is, Colin, is those all the talk recently has been those proposal that those conditions have still to have been certified. So there's chat about amongst the SFA and all that sort of stuff. I think they've been keen to talk it down that they will be certified, all that sort of stuff. But I think there's a little bit of anxiety from people outside of that bubble of the fact that those rules haven't been quite sort of written into Scottish football law yet.
Oh, okay, fair enough. We'll take a look at that maybe in a future episode then. I said both teams have lost one game so far. Celtic's defeat was to Sean's Bonnyrigg Rose on opening day, a 2-1 defeat for Celtic. A game that I think Celtic actually played very well, considering it was their first game into the league against one of the, if not the strongest side in the league. Rangers' defeat was a 3-1 defeat to Civil Service Strollers, a team who, if you've been watching the Lowland League over the last few years, it'll come as a surprise as to where they have came from this season. They've certainly been the surprise package.
Beat us as well. Beat Bonnyrigg as well.
Yeah. There's a comment here from Daniel Mack, and I think it's because of these results. It says both sides are running amok in that league. They need to move up one. Celtic beat Vale of Leithen 10-0, with Owen Moffat scoring 5 goals. Rangers also beat Vale of Leithen 9-0, but they beat Gretna 2008, which is Gretna's Phoenix club, 9-1 as well. You can see why they're piling up the goals, Sean. Now, we spoke about this probably just slightly earlier, but in terms of quality, they are adding a element of quality to the Lowland League, aren't they?
Yeah, they're good. They're good sides. I mean, on that opening day, I was massively impressed, like you said, considering the fact that it was their first ever time playing together as a team. And I think Bonnyrigg were definitely stronger in the first half, and Celtic really grew into it and got their goal from a set piece, and then scored a goal that was ruled offside, and you're thinking that they could properly come into this. And for me, it was a good. It ended up being a really good result from Bonnyrigg just to hold on in that game, because Celtic really did sort of get their tails up and come into it. But the flip side to you're talking about quality, all that sort of stuff. These are full-time players. Like these guys are in the academy every single day, training, fitness, the best facilities you could possibly get in the game. Meanwhile, these guys are working 9 to 5, sometimes night shift, and then coming to games and all that sort of stuff. It's two completely different lives and two completely different setups that you've got to deal with. So I think that, and no disrespect to Vale or Gretna or anything like that, but these are clubs who have, over the last couple of years, struggled in terms of results in the Lowland League. And so you think that, I don't think it's fair to say they're running amok when the circumstances are so different for these teams. And I think that as much as they seem like very good sides, like you said, they've slipped up a couple of times themselves, and I think they'll do so on a few more occasions this season. So it should make for an interesting title race, but then for me that's a little bit sort of hollow, considering neither of them can get promoted, which is the right decision in my view.
I'm going to bring this comment in from Lewis, who has been watching for a long time, and I know Lewis goes to every one of the Colts games. In fact, if you're looking for Celtic Colts coverage, I would go no further than looking at Lewis's Twitter feed. Not true. I don't actually think that Celtic and Rangers are running amok with it. I think Celtic are, 6th or 7th in the table just now?
I think they're maybe a game behind as well, aren't they?
Yeah, we've only played 8 games so far.
Yeah, because they got moved, so the mini old firm got moved. So fancy.
Simply not true. Attended all Celtic games apart from the opener against Bonnyrigg because they didn't let Celtic fans in. It's a joke, Sean. Don't bite at that. Celtic are definitely not running amok. Been very competitive in the majority of the games. That seems to be the case. I mean, it's like 1-0, 2-0, 2-1. They are very, very close games. And I think a lot of people say that at the start that Celtic and Rangers should have to drop into further down the pyramid, into the likes of tier 6 or tier 7 to start there. But for me, when you look at it, if you're competitive at the Lowland League level, and obviously there's the results that we spoke about, the 10-0s, the 9-0s and that, I think it's more beneficial for the game overall that these games are competitive, as opposed to, say, the likes of going down to maybe playing against Port Glasgow Juniors or Largs Thistle or somewhere like that, where the results could be 6-7-0 every week. I don't think that helps the leagues in any sort of development at all.
But my point to you last week is it's not the job of Lowland League football clubs to make sure that Celtic and Rangers have good youngsters coming through. That's not our job. That's how I see it anyway. And other people in the same bubble who might come under that might disagree with me. But I just think that it's the job of those academies. It's the job of Scottish football as a whole to do that. And I just think parachuting into our league where there's like teams have worked very, very hard to come through, like us, come through the East of Scotland. We were juniors, then we were East of Scotland. We've made those steps, and there's clubs working very hard in the West of Scotland just now to do just that, to get themselves into the pyramid. And for Celtic and Rangers to sort of cut the line in a sense is something that just didn't sit right with me at the time. I get your point about competitiveness. I just don't think it's anyone's responsibility but Celtic and Rangers and perhaps the SFA to make sure that Celtic and Rangers have talented youngsters coming through, because the argument is it benefits the national team. Obviously it'll take a long time for us to see that, but I'm not convinced. I feel like it's a line that's peddled a little bit to try and soften the blow. And my favourite thing is when Nikola Katic played for Rangers B the other week, to one of those talented young Scottish youngsters coming through. I just think, it's a wee bit hollow for me.
That was in the SPFL Trust Trophy, wasn't it? Or the Challenge Cup, it's called now.
And we were also told that Celtic and Rangers would bring loads of fans to the games, and they'd be boost attendances and boost revenue for the clubs. That game against Dumbarton, in which Katic played, was the lowest attendance at the Rock since it became since work had been done to it from a certain time. I think it was only 250 odd people had showed up at that game, so not exactly bringing the crowds in as was promised.
Well, this is one of the things that I was actually trying to look into, and it's very difficult to get the attendances across the Lowland League. I don't think they're published anywhere. But looking at the game, I think Rangers played Dumbarton in the previous round, the game that you were referring to. That attendance was registered as 354. But I know that Rangers are playing their home games at Dumbarton Stadium. Celtic are playing at Airdrie's Excelsior, or Penny Car Stadium as it's called now. When we speak about the government restrictions that you spoke about, Celtic fans not getting into the Bonnyrigg games, and Lewis is still watching, so I'd be interested to know. In fact, we should have had Lewis on. That would have been a good talking point there. In terms of attendances, Rangers sold out the Dumbarton Stadium under the kind of limits when they could only have 500, and I believe that their attendances are overall very good for home games. Now, when you look at Bonnyrigg, what would you average attendance be on a match day?
Probably somewhere between, depending on obviously the size of game, I'd say last few weeks we've been sitting at sort of 500, 600. I think that obviously with Hearts and Hibs coming back, that takes away a bit of our fan base and stuff like that, with them playing on Saturdays again. But I think, and there was a big festival on. I don't know what you're like for your Dalkeith music festivals, but there was a big festival on in Midlothian at the weekend, which I think it was pretty impressive that we still had over 500 fans there. Not too many people had went to see Adamant in the country park. I thought that was a pretty decent turnout. So I think that for those games, I mean, we play Rangers next Saturday. I expect there to be a pretty decent crowd there, especially considering that it's kind of a top of the table clash. But I think when you look at when Celtic and Rangers were in the Challenge Cup before they were parachuted into the Lowland League, attendances went down then as well. compared to the average home attendance, and I don't really think that I've seen a massive difference personally. And maybe the numbers will prove me wrong come at the end of the season, but so far I wouldn't say that there's a huge difference really.
What would a huge difference be to a club like Bonnyrigg? Would it be an extra 100, 150? Are you looking for maybe like 500-600 fans to make that kind of big difference?
I mean, I'm not really privy to club finances or anything like that. So it'd be more a personal take. I mean, anyone who fancies coming down to this park, come. You'll have a smashing time. Everyone's lovely. And the football's pretty good as well. So I'd encourage anyone to come along. It depends. I mean, a lot of us was made of that 25 grand that you spoke about at the start, but we'd all just been given a lottery grant because of the pandemic. And those teams right at the top who have been, they can have a different approach to us in the terms that they have a little bit more investment financially, which is fine if that's how they run their club. That's okay. I don't think any club needed 25 grand split 16 ways or whatever it was. I don't really think that's helped any of the clubs too much. It's not a life-altering change for any of those teams. So I don't think the financial thing was a line that was given as a positive. It will really help you all out. I wouldn't say that a couple of extra home games and all that sort of stuff is going to make too much of a difference. But that was Berwick Rangers thing. They said the reason they were going for it is because you'd get 2 extra home games and those finances would be a big plus for them. So each their own in terms of clubs. And again, I'm speaking for myself and not Bonnyrigg Rose. But I wouldn't say that just an extra 100 fans of that is going to change your season or change your club's outlook too much.
Lewis has just came in to say, don't think that the clubs are doing enough to push it out. For the first home game of the season, tickets were on sale under 24 hours before the fixture. That's Celtic and Rangers he's referring to there.
Yeah.
I do think that's right. I do try and look out for the games and when the tickets are on sale, and it's almost a sort of last minute thing that they push it with the game coming up at the weekend. The biggest one I've actually seen is for Celtic's game against Morton. They've been pushing this for the last sort of week and a half, and I think that's because it's an international break, to be perfectly honest.
There should be a big crowd there.
I haven't heard much from local fans down here in terms of going through for the Morton end, but I would be interested to see what the crowd is at that game. One thing, in fact, 2 questions I'd like to ask actually before we kind of wrap up this topic. The first one is, should the experiment be extended by an additional year, 2 years, 3 years, and your reasons behind your answer on that?
Like I said, it's just preferable to me that we have a rethink of youth football in Scotland and how that works. I'm just not a fan of the Celtic and Rangers B teams being given this kind of priority in the way that I'm not saying chuck Celtic and Rangers down to the bottom, like you said. Like, I think if they want to properly make their way through the leagues, if the SPFL is their goal, then I do think they have to do that. If in terms of just being like a placeholder, I don't think them just playing in the Lowland League every season without being able to get promoted works either, really. Like, games could start to become a little bit meaningless when you've done it for a certain amount of time. So I think having an opportunity to have Aberdeen B, Hearts B, Hibs B, Motherwell B, and they find a way to make those games relevant, and I don't know how, if it's in terms of qualification for like the UEFA Youth League or something like that, instead of it being just who wins the Premiership and then they go in. I think that kind of making changes like that and making sure that these players play to a good standard, play proper level, and make sure that clubs are developing their youth as well and not just wasting money on loans and all that sort of stuff. Because there's far too many clubs in Scotland who have basically cut their youth development programmes completely. That's not going to help the national team either. And just having Celtic and Rangers being given this opportunity isn't going to do that as well. It's not just Celtic and Rangers who produces talent for the national team. So for me, I'd say cut the experiment at the end of this year and find a solution that benefits Scottish football and as a whole sort of more equally would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I think there's a way to implement a sort of league of Colt teams into the pyramid somewhere. I'm not sure which level they would put it in at, but I do think that they should be a way to bring it in. And as long as you don't look at it as that's the reserve league, but it is a league that's open for promotion and relegation, then I think it works if you include it within the system. But I'm sure that the kind of boffins at the Scottish FA will work on some sort of weird and wonderful reconstruction like they do every summer. Just finally, before we move on, if it was put to the Lowland League teams again for next season, do you think that the result would be the same? Do you think that they would vote the same way? Or do you think, given the sort of 10 games that you've seen so far, there would be teams that would say, nah, it's just not for us?
That's hard. That's a tough question. An 11-5 majority, I wouldn't say that enough's been done to cut that to being a majority in the other way, if you get what I'm saying there. I don't think I can't imagine there being that much of a change, and I wouldn't really know how other teams feel about it. I'm sure there's some teams who don't like being thrashed or don't like any of that sort of stuff, but there's also teams who might have had the benefit of a little bit extra money through the gate, or even like more folk buying streams and stuff like that. So it's hard to predict, but my sort of intuition would be that that not enough has gone wrong for 11 enough of a change in terms of that 11-5 split. So I'd say it would probably stay if it was opened again.
Quick question in here from Terence Pat. What if Celtic or Rangers meet their B team in a cup competition? They actually can't, because the B teams can't enter the teams that the cups that the main teams enter. With a couple of minutes to go in the show, there's a couple of other things I just want to briefly mention. Let's take a look at the SPFL Trust fixtures this weekend. Airdrie play Queen's Park, Stranraer play Partick, Albion Rovers against St Mirren B, Montrose versus Stirling Albion, Aberdeen B versus Arbroath, Celtic B versus Morton, one of the ties of the round that we were kind of suggesting. Cove Rangers play Stenhouse Muir, Cowden Beef are against Alloa, Elgin are already through after Dunfermline had to pull out with COVID concerns. Inverness Cally play Bucky Thistle. Kelly, Sean's side, are up against Falkirk, which we discussed earlier in the show. Go back and check that out if you haven't seen it. Peterhead play East Fife, Rafe play Forfar, and Queen of the South play Broomhill, who were previously BSC Glasgow. They changed their name this season. Was there any particular reason behind that? Do you know?
Just a rebrand for them, I think. It's just what they wanted to go. It was a commitment to getting back to Broomhill, where the club's originally formed. It was, they're playing their games at Alloa's Recreation Park at the moment, but their long-term, or medium-term plan, I guess, is to get their own ground in the Broomhill area.
I would suggest if any of those teams are playing in the area with there being no top flight football this weekend, go and support your local team. Get along. The tickets are reasonably cheap. If you're a Celtic fan and you're looking to go to the game against Morton, I think it's £10 for an adult and maybe £5 or £6 for a concession. I'm sure Lewis will know exactly how much it is if he'll put it in the comments section. There's also the Women's Premier League starting this weekend as well. Glasgow City going for their 15th title in a row against Motherwell, and the newcomers into the league, Aberdeen, are up against Celtic. Both games are live on BBC Alba, with Glasgow City kicking off at 1 o'clock and Aberdeen Celtic at 4 o'clock, and a brand new highlight show on BBC Scotland on Monday nights at 7. Now, just briefly before we wrap up, Sean, I'm curious to get your take on this, because you know how much it is into Bonnyrigg. I know how much it is into Celtic Park. I know how much it is into most grounds. But the Dundee Derby coming up, they're now charging £30 a ticket to get into it. It's getting to the point where we're just pricing fans out of football. Especially
after what we've all just gone through over the last 18 months. And you think that as much as they'll need cash, you think it'd make so much more sense to chuck it at 20, 15 quid and just get the place full and get people in love with football again, get them back through the doors. It makes absolute, and especially for Dundee Derby, like, look after your fans, like, look after your own city. And I don't mean to get sort of too political or societal, but Dundee has struggled for a long time in terms of sort of recovering from years of hardship. So I think that just clubs should reflect their community. I want to give a wee shout out to Motherwell this week, who have done so much stuff. I don't know if you saw that
yep.
Emailing fans who missed the Dundee game to make sure they were doing all right. Like, they don't need to do that. They've also put on new community projects as well for folk to come along and have a game of fives and have a cup of tea if they're not feeling great. They're a fantastic club. There was a great article in the eye about by Daniel Storey, just about what a great community club Motherwell are. I'd suggest folk dig it out. But stuff like this just, it really winds me up because there's absolutely no need for it. And Scottish football would be in a better place as a whole if he just capped it at 20 quid and everyone went along. Yeah, I was thinking about going to Tynecastle with a couple of pals the other week for, who did Hearts play on a Sunday? Aberdeen. And they sent me, as if you're wanting to come, it's 34 quid. I'm like, I'm not paying 34 quid to not even watch my own team. And I love going along to the football, but I've just not got 34 quid to be chucking out on a game that's not even my team. So it's a massive disappointment because there's folk like me as well who would just like to go along to a game just because they want to go along to a game. And that's why I'd say if folk are pricing you out like this, 30 quid to go to a derby, I'd say get yourself invested in some non-league football because those folk will never let you down.
I've got to agree. I think that the pricing is probably a topic for another day as we kind of hit the hour mark with the Clyde podcast just about to follow us. I've got to say Scottish football pricing does have to take a good look at itself. I know teams have obviously been through a lot during this pandemic era, but if you're going to try and encourage fans back to the ground, the first thing you have to do is take a look at your pricing, make it reasonable and fill your house. It's better to have 10,000 at £20 than to have 2,000 or 3,000 at £30. That's just basic economics there. Basic economics. I'm sure we'll cover this.
You're an expert.
Basic economics. Not the doctor of thugonomics. That's something different. It's been great having you all with us today on Facebook, on LinkedIn, everywhere that we're on. It's great to have you along. Myself and Sean will be back next Friday as we take a look to the top flight. Oh, are you not here?
Transmit, mate.
Oh, you're doing a runner again? Well, I'll be here because I'm always here to take a look at the top flight fixtures next weekend. I'll be looking for a co-host, so anyone that's watching and wants to get involved, you can let us know. Jerry H just quickly saying $28 to watch Lewis Morgan. I hope you get a refund at times. It's been great bringing the state of Scottish football. If you are going along to a game, enjoy it. I'm sure it'll be very reasonably priced considering the games that we've got going on. We will be back tomorrow to cover the Scotland versus Moldova game. Until then, take care, stay safe and subscribe to the channel.